Hi, it's Mr. Anderson, and in this podcast, I'm going to talk about fungi. Fungi is a pretty diverse group. It's things that you're familiar with, like a mushroom, but it's also things that are much smaller than that, like a yeast, which are going to be single-cell fungi. And they're also going to form sometimes symbiotic relationships. So lichen, for example, is a symbiotic relationship between a fungi and then an algae. And so not only do they break down and decompose material, but they're also going to serve another role, working symbiotically with both algae and then plants to allow them to function better. And so basically, if we look at their phylogeny, so this is the eukaryotes. So we're going to talk about things now that have a nucleus and have organelles. And you can find here that here's our fungi. In other words, when we try to classify all eukaryotes, we're going to put them right here. If you look at animals, animals are going to be right here. And so what does this mean? Well, we're going to share more recent common ancestry with fungi than we are with plants, which are going to be way back here, because we'd put green plants way over on this side. And so we probably have more in common with a fungi, especially the way we live our life, than we do with green plants. But we're not directly related to them. This is more into the phylogeny of the actual fungi. And again, we get this from the Tree of Life project. And so you can see that we have this break off like this. And there are monophyletic groups. In other words, there's going to be some groups that you should know, because we know that these things all share common ancestry and they're one group. And so there are going to be 5 of those: Chytridiomycota, Zygomycota, Glomerulomycota, Ascomycota, and then Basidiomycota. And so these are ones that you do need to know because they're monophyletic and they're important when we're studying biology. But before we get there, let's get to the characteristics of fungi. Well, they're eukaryotic, so they've got nuclei and organelles. They're heterotrophs. They originally were classified as plants, and you can see why. It almost looks like a plant, and they don't move. They don't run around like animals. And they almost have these root-like structures that look like plant roots. And so we used to classify them as plants, but they're not. They eat material, and they're going to digest material. I'll show you some cool examples of that in just a second. They have cell walls, so that separates them from us. Also the fact that they don't move. And those cell walls are made of a polysaccharide called chitin. The exoskeleton of insects are made from that similar structure. Most of the inside of the structure is actually going to be filamentous. In other words, it's made of filaments. And so this would be the filaments in a mushroom. You can see these thin little filaments. You can see the cell wall going around the outside of it. But they're not going to have any true tissues. In other words, they're not going to have, for example, muscle tissue or nervous tissue. It's just going to be a group of these hyphae